So good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Eswine. I am the co-chair of the Department of Urban Planning here at UW-Milwaukee, and we're excited to welcome you to our Innovative Cities lecture series. I will start with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge in Milwaukee that we are on traditional Potawatomi Ho-Chunk and Menominee homeland along the southwest shores of Michigamme, North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Knickknick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee and Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. I always encourage you to explore the resources that we share and become familiar in connections with the indigenous communities that were on the land before us. So welcome to today's lecture. As a reminder, we have a couple others coming up for the semester. November 12th, we have marketplaces that'll talk about food access and health, planning strategies to implement different market types. And then on December 3rd, we have public transit collaboration and project priorities. The city and the counties of Milwaukee will take a look at that and share their projects with you. So today's topic is placemaking in action. We're focusing on Wisconsin's Vibrant Communities and Places grant and impacts from those projects in Waupun and Waupaca. It'll include private-public partnerships, how they're filling vacant properties. They have some really exciting projects that they're going to share with you, and how those different events are driving downtown foot traffic and overall has a positive economic impact. We're joined by Erin Welty. She's the Senior Director of the Downtown Development at Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Greg Groman, he's a grant writer with the City of Waupaca. And Kathy Schlebe, she's the City Administrator and Director of Economic Development for the City of Waupun. So please put your comments or questions in the chat. We will make sure we have time at the end for a little bit of a discussion. And I'm really excited to pass it on to Erin. So thank you for joining us.
Awesome. I am thrilled to be here. These are always enjoyable because I like talking to people who like to talk about geeky things that drive cities. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I am fortunate to be able to do it across the entire state. And I even more like to let our communities share their success stories, because that is the best part of my job, is seeing these projects come to fruition. So WDC's vision is to create an economy for all. And one of the goals of placemaking is to help people fall in love with the places that they live, because then we know that they will be more likely to invest in those places and support those places. So just we are going to talk a little bit today about the Vibrant Spaces grant that we have, but I wanted to give a little background on how we got here, because this was a program that's fairly new for WEDC. We're in our third year. There's a lot of definitions for placemaking out there. Everybody on this call, I'm sure, knows what placemaking is because you are here. But we really think of it as creating places where people want to be. I like to say that no one has ever taken wedding pictures in a strip mall or made a memory in a big box store. But we know that people do move to communities because they have a sense of place, they have a sense of downtown, and they are memorable. So we try to help our communities figure out ways to make themselves memorable so that they are attractive to companies, to small businesses, and everybody else that wants to make investments in our communities. But of course, we aren't doing this, just for benevolence. We do placemaking because it actually supports the local economy. We provide these spaces that we are supporting, provide places for visitors to stay and linger and spend more money. We've spent places that, downtown residents can gather and visit local businesses. One of the key factors that we look for this grant is for walkable places, so spaces that are walkable to local businesses, so that there can be that connection and tie between people who are engaging in civic activity and people who are patronizing local businesses, and then ways to maximize kind of our downtown land value. And also to engage residents in the community. We know that property values for chronically vacant properties are about half of that of those that are full. And one way to make a property more valuable is to put an active space that's actively drawing foot traffic nearby. So if we can create spaces that are drawing people, then there will be more businesses that want to be located near them. And more activity means safer streets, it means healthier lifestyles. It means higher property values and more local businesses, which are all things that we like to promote. I like to highlight this photo on the right. This is from Minnesota, so we're not quite that cool in Wisconsin, but this is Snowga. It's snow yoga. So if any of you start a snow yoga group in your city, I want a picture because I want a Wisconsin picture of it. So some of the things that we got here. So this program emerged kind of post-COVID. We were looking at, obviously, people were more concerned about outdoor gathering spaces, but also we did a survey of some of our other state agencies and said, hey, what demand are you seeing from your communities that is just not being filled, that you don't have any programs for? And so whether it was the DNR or tourism, like, you know, people want to create spaces and we just don't have any funds for these programmable places that people are really seeing as a need for their communities. So we put together a bunch of statistics that talk about, you know, why these are economically important. You'll see a bunch of pictures throughout, and these are all examples of projects that we funded in that first year of the program. And then we looked to what other states were doing, and there were some existing placemaking grant programs in some of our nearby states. And then we launched a pilot program in FY23, and there was 210 people, so almost as many as here today, that attended the webinar. 101 communities requested applications, and we got 88 completed applications. So that told us that there was a lot of demand for this project. 11,000 social media impressions. So these are some of the numbers that we tracked, and obviously the communities that present today are going to highlight some of the numbers that they tracked for their programs as well. And as you'll see from the pictures, they the projects that we've funded ranged hugely from traditional park spaces in the heart of downtown to streets that were closed, which is the one you're seeing today, to alleys, to band shells, to parks that featured accessibility improvements or nighttime lighting, kind of the whole spectrum. But it was really driven by what we wanted, what the communities were looking for. So we let them tell us what they needed, as long as, again, it was walkable and it was visible and it connected to businesses. So this is what we came up with, and this is the Vibrant Spaces that has changed slightly. So it was the first 2 years a competitive grant. So there were applications, and we, again, funded about half of the applications that came in. Now in our third year that we have not, we're open to applications as they come. So if you have a project in your community that you feel might be a good fit, you can contact your regional director and have a conversation about that project. But it's a 50% match up to $50,000 for hard costs associated with making one of these placemaking projects. You know, again, visible, walkable, designed to provide an economic benefit. We always get some people who are like, we have this great park and it's near downtown and it really needs new restrooms and new swings. Not the kind of project that we are funding. This is really for reimagining a multi-purpose programmable space that can foster kind of new activities and events, as you will hear from our presenters. New this year, we did hear from some of our really rural communities that they really a strength of rural communities is that they have a lot of in-kind support for their projects. You know, the local manufacturing company is fabricating the benches, and the local cement contractor is laying the cement, and our underwriters don't underwrite that as match. And so that we were hearing from our very small places that that was kind of a detriment to their match. So now communities that are under 5,000 in population or distressed can only have a 25% match instead of a 50% match. And this is this container park was funded in our first year, finally just opened. So if you're up in the Eau Claire area, this is a former brownfield site that is now a container park, and we funded the programming yard for it. So far in the first 2 rounds, we have funded 61 projects. 50% of those are rural, $9.5 million invested, and I think the leverage is about 15 to 1. So for every dollar of state funds, 15 local dollars were invested in the program. And these are where the communities are. And we have I think a blog post on our website if you're interested in reading some of the features of the projects that we have funded. We have heard a lot from our communities about what the impact has been. So Two Rivers had Central Park, which is the one you saw initially. They have hosted 4 large and 50 small events in just the first 4 months that the park was open, and had 5 major donors and 220 individuals contribute. So again, that's demonstrating that these places allow people to invest in their communities and create places that they feel embraced, and they feel that they have had a role in making happen, which is really important for creating community cohesion. Mosinee had a community paint party that you see to help build their spot. Elkhorn tripled in size when they had people donate. One of my favorite personal stories, Monroe created a pocket park that has public restrooms, which is the only type of structure, enclosed structure that we allow through the program. It had been a goal. They found a newspaper article from 1888 stating that they needed about public restrooms in downtown Monroe. So now, 200 years later, they finally have public restrooms in downtown Monroe. And some more examples just of kind of before and after and examples, but they're far and wide and they're across the states. And we continue to get lots of great pictures of little kids and people engaging in. I was on a call with Medford the other day and they were talking about the metrics that they use to measure success. And their splash pad and placemaking park. They did a farmers market pavilion and a kind of a riverfront programming area next to the splash pad. And they said that they really measure the success by the amount of giggles that they can hear from City Hall, which is next door, which I love. And if there's a way to quantify the amount of giggles, I think there should be an actual metric of that, because that is exactly what they were going for as part of their project. So I'm going to turn it over to our first project and let Kathy talk about what Waupun did.
Hi, so my name is Kathy and I am the administrator here at the City of Waupun. I've been here in this role for around 10 years, which seems like yesterday when I joined. But I think most people, when you say Waupun, think prisons. And there's really so much more that has been worked on and so much more that the community can bring to the table. So I want to explain today as a bit of the journey we've been on over the last 10 years and how the Vibrant Spaces grant has really been helpful. So what you see pictured here, and then we'll advance the slide here, and is the end of the trail sculpture. And it's a phenomenal piece of art that is centered in the community. And so there are many complementary sculptures that have been added throughout the community that have earned us the title City of Sculpture, at least in Wisconsin. So keep that in mind, because you'll see how that plays into the work that we're doing. So early on, one of the initiatives that we really started was centered around downtown revitalization, and we did a streetscaping plan. And you'll see here in a minute a building, but essentially we had an old dilapidated building, and it had a lot of code violation issues and things that we were grappling with as a city, trying to determine, what do we do? Can we try and work with the property owner who was elderly at the time? Or do we issue a raise order on the building, which would have eliminated a historic feature of our downtown and created some more of a toothpick kind of appearance to our downtown. And you'll see here in a minute what I mean by that. But we did invest heavily in a streetscaping plan where we spent a lot of time on the planning effort, gathering community input from the businesses, and really talking about what is it that would make our downtown more robust and vibrant. That included working with we have a business improvement district in our downtown, as well as our community development authority. And things we heard in that survey were, we don't have a cohesive look or feel to our downtown. There's nothing remarkable about our downtown. There's a lot of just similar colors and nothing of all that much interest. We don't have a gathering place. That was a huge opportunity. And then people really just wanted to see more restaurants. And that's a challenge. So I'll talk a little bit about how our project led to the solution that we ended up with. And so here you see that building, and you can see both on the right and the left, or east and west of the building, there's buildings that have been taken down because they were deteriorated. So had we removed that building, it would have created even a bigger space. So that picture you saw on the previous slide was kind of a vision of, well, what if the building wasn't there? What would this look like? But our goal was very much to focus on blight elimination. We had created a tax increment district in the downtown that creates some leverage for us. And we happened to come across a developer who was interested in repurposing the building. So before on the left-hand side, after on the right-hand side. And this really was a catalyst project for our downtown, where we started to see people reimagine and believe again that this could be a vibrant economic hub for the city. And so we've very much in that placemaking kind of streetscaping planning process looked at how do we create a place where people can be, and how do we answer some of these questions that were developed. And then really focused on trying to get alignment. We have a lot of different groups that are contributing in meaningful ways to our downtown, but it's a bit of a mismatch sometimes. There's not necessarily alignment. So starting to talk about similar goals and interests and how we can leverage each other's activities was part of this process. So we had to reimagine that earlier drawing and start to think about, well, we have two spaces on either side of this building, and what could it look like? And so we spent some time really thinking about what would a downtown plaza look like if we were to leverage both of those spaces. And you'll see here in a minute, we really narrowed in for our project on the right-hand side, which is the food truck alley. So if you want to advance, Aaron. And here's the space that existed on the east side of the building that I showed earlier. And you get a feel for what people were talking about in the community survey. So you see a lot of inconsistencies in design aesthetics. It looked and felt very Southwestern in terms of its feel. And what we were really going for was like historic preservation and trying to add elements of interest that made people want to be there. This was a space that the community, when the building was taken down, had invested in, but it was consistently vacant. No one used it because there was no reason to be there. No one was programming it, etc. And then over time, the space needed to be maintained, and we hadn't done an adequate job of that. So it was looking. This was probably in its original days, this picture, and it was looking far worse than this. We had no access to utility services. So when we tried to do, for example, a holiday tree lighting event, and our mayor wanted to communicate some things to the community, we didn't have lighting. We didn't have access to any kind of sound amplification so people could hear. So it just was less than it could have been. And it led to a lot of missed opportunities. The space wasn't all that accessible for people who might need more accessible access points. So if you're in a wheelchair, for example, we just didn't even have good furnishings to accommodate some of those things. And really what we saw was investment from a public perspective was lagging what was happening with the private sector, where we had seen that building increase in value by 256% on the tax roll. So here you see us really trying to drill down into and describe our project through our Vibrant Spaces grant application. And we narrowed in on this. So you see the before and after here. We were awarded a roughly $45,000 Vibrant Spaces grant. We ended up investing around $90,000 from the public sector using TID dollars to eliminate blight. And then our focus really was on design and construction, utility connections, adding Wi-Fi, ADA standards were met, adding seating and landscaping. You don't see that all pictured here, but if you advance a slide, Aaron, you'll see that activation of the space was really key. So if before no one was using the space, creating all these great new amenities wouldn't change if we didn't do something to activate the space. So we had to work with community stakeholders to really get cooperative effort. So what you see here is the use of artists, both caricature artists and musicians, adding sculptures that were elements. We have a rotating sculpture exhibit, so that sculpture is always rotating out, adding food trucks. In the survey, we had learned that restaurants, as I said, was a challenge for us. So this is a way to kind of complement what we already have going on and give people another reason to be downtown. And then in the lower corner, we had a community group that worked on a mural, more like a photo op space. And that's what you see kind of as a being ribbon cutting event there. So go ahead and advance. And this was the day we did our grand opening of the space. And you see a wide swath of community stakeholders here, including local government, a lot of nonprofits who were doing good things in the community, as well as the private sector represented here. So from vacancy to vibrancy, you can see really there's a list of things, and we continue to build on this list. But in the first year, we had 5 different events that we held, including our first appropriately lit and amplified community holiday tree lighting. And then we've got festivals and things that are occurring through our downtown that are leveraging and using the space as well. So in total, we have 8 events, I think, that we've held in the last year and had over 3,000 visitors attend. This is one of the events we added this summer was First Friday's event. So we tried to work with our recreation department and create family-friendly events where people could come into the downtown. And we had a petting zoo and pony rides, and it was a major hit with the kids. So I think lessons learned, the things that I can share from my experience. I have a community that doesn't like to invest a lot of time in planning, and that's because I think for many years they've seen plans end up on the shelf. But this is where we can start to show how planning connects to investment and results, and we're seeing that. But I think really some key ideas here are to make sure that you're dedicating resources. So that activation piece was critical to seeing success here, and that required that we engage with community partners to make sure that activation was not only planned and coordinated, but that it was financed as well. So we leveraged each other's resources to make that happen. One of the challenges I think we saw was some of the restaurants that we do have looked at that and said, food trucks, why would you bring food trucks in? That's going to compete with us. That's not good. And the reality is this is an event space, and that the food trucks are not there every day. And this is just a way to get more traffic flow in our downtown. So assuring them that it's not going to be a threat, but it's complementary to the things that they're doing. And I think when you talk to all of them now, they are starting to see the benefit of people coming into the downtown, and then that spills over into what they do on a routine basis. So over communicating, I think, don't assume people just get behind the vision. We've got to make sure that we bring them along and be part of the vision. Flexibility matters. We didn't anticipate in our initial plan that building was going to stay in the center of the project, but it did, and we're glad it did. So we really had to pivot, and we found we were able to do that and re-envision spaces. Ordinances, like things like food truck ordinances, we didn't have any of those things in place. So we did have to spend some time really working on developing those. And actually we developed, approved, and then came back and made some further revisions based on additional community input. Make sure that you budget and plan for maintenance and expansion. So the green space that you see it's on the other side of that building that remained. And we envision that this could be an extension or further extension in a phase 2 expansion. And what will that look like? So we're in the planning process now. To fund, I think sponsorships has been something we've been exploring. Is there a bank or, local business that's willing to help support the ongoing costs of operating these sites? And then keep building on momentum. So since we've really been making concerted investments and using tools like the Vacant Spaces Grant, we continue to see more and more investment coming into our downtown. And so we want to make sure that we continue to leverage the excitement and create new opportunity for people to be here. So what's next? We continue planning. And so what you see here, we had the UW extension in. Actually, this occurred last year. And we did walk around with a variety of community stakeholders. That's what's pictured on the top left. And we identified a project that we will be working on in 2026 to look at back alleyway improvements to create more walkable spaces and more comfortable seating venues for people to move them off Main Street and away from we got real heavy truck traffic. We've got mural work that's happening. And new this year for us, we are now trying to take our involvement with the Main Street program and move it to the next level. So we are a Main Street cohort kind of member and working collectively in a really positive way to move our community forward and continue our revitalization efforts and historic preservation efforts. This would not be possible without all of the partners that you see here. And in particular, I want to thank WEDC for the chance to leverage this grant and make a real difference in our community.
Awesome. And we've sent several communities to go and visit their food truck alley because they want to do food truck alleys too, especially those communities without food truck ordinances that can't put them on the street. So it's been a great asset to send people to. And now Greg's going to talk about Wapaka, which also has fun success stories.
Yeah. All right. I'm Greg Roman. I'm a shared grant writer. I work jointly for the city of Wapaka, the school district of Wapaka, and the Wapaka area Chamber of Commerce, sort of for the greater Wapaka area as a whole. And if you want to advance to the next slide. So when you think about Wapaka, you might think about the Channel Lakes area, and it's true that the Wapaka chain has been a very successful tourist destination for almost a century. But historically, Wapaka's Main Street saw very little connection between the chain and Main Street. We were not successful at bringing people from the chain into our downtown. And so like so many other small rural towns in Wisconsin, Wapaka's Main Street struggled with commercial vacancies, a degraded car-centric streetscape, and storefronts that were historic, but were also showing their age. Even within the Main Street environment, disparities existed. Our South Main Street is anchored by a few long-standing restaurants, and so has seen pretty consistently high visitation, whereas our North Main Street, for the longest time, really provided no reason to visit, and so it saw extremely high rates of commercial vacancy. So today I'll be talking about how Wapaka used placemaking as a strategy to turn North Main Street in particular from that sad gray image you see on the left to the vibrant, bustling atmosphere you see on the right. Next slide, please. Ooh, that's a little weird, but okay. Well, I guess it's on my screen. A second here. Yeah, okay. Well, Wapaka is known for, like all good things, our efforts at revitalization began with a plan. The downtown plan identified our assets, our historic Main Street, our recreation economy, and the strength of our community groups, and built a concept for Main Street centered around placemaking. Major strategies of the plan called for preserving and enhancing Main Street's unique historic character, integrating art from local artists, and making Main Street the streetscape that works for people first and cars last, or at least not first. We've been working to activate these strategies ever since the plan was published in 2017. It's taken really great local partnerships to pull it off, which is something that I think rural communities have in abundance. So throughout our 2021 Main Street project, the city worked really closely with the Chamber of Commerce and our local civic and arts organizations to build a unique place, to provide unique place-based amenities on our Main Street, which would include sidewalk poetry, nearly 30 murals, sculptures, a street sound audio system, outdoor seating, and flowers. And then to celebrate the opening of Main Street with those amenities, we also worked with our partners to throw a big party, which was our Halloween on Main. And we did that in 2021. It was so successful and the party was so good that we've done it every year since. It's Waupaca's most successful event by visitation, and it's totally free, draws a great mix of people. And like Aaron said earlier, when people fall in love with places, they invest in those places. The city developed a downtown incentive program seeded with $500,000 from a donor tax incremental district, which we used for facade enhancement. We were able to turn that $500,000 into $2.5 million for property investments at over 60 sites in our downtown. And this changing atmosphere has attracted all sorts of business attention, and also funding from agencies like the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. And I'll highlight some of those examples in a minute, but I also want to say that we're not done yet. We received some grants from the DOT to extend Main Street's look even further down Fulton Street, which is a connecting commercial corridor, which we'll do in 2026. And we also received a transportation alternatives grant to further enhance Waupaca's downtown pedestrian environment by reconstructing a pedestrian bridge that connects to the Main Street that's been closed for over 15 years. So stay tuned, more to come. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So a few examples before we talk about our Vibrant Spaces project. I think these all enhance one another. In 2021, we received $118,000 from the Community Development Investment Grant through the WEDC, which we paired with $40,000 in downtown incentive and $267,000 in private investment to transform this anchor vacant establishment on Main Street, North Main, into a vibrant and commercially successful building that draws people in to like a records shop and another retailer on the ground floor and pulls them through all of North Main Street. So that it's set some dominoes in motion for us with other major investments that followed, including one right here that I'm really excited about is our Empty Barrel Distillery project, which we got funding for through CDIG in 2023. It's just up the street, stone's throw from the Weddington Block property. We were successful in receiving $122,000 from CDI with over $600,000 in developer investment to transform what was a rundown exotic pet store owned by a prosecuted murderer into this really neat project, which has just opened this spring. And then next slide. And then that finally, this brings us to our Vibrant Spaces project, which is a stone's throw from the distillery, the Danes Hall Plaza. So in 2023, we received a Vibrant Spaces grant to work in public-private partnership with Waupaca Danes Hall to deliver a placemaking improvement that anchors North Main Street. The area that became the plaza was at the time a vacated, unused roadway that was barricaded off from Main Street. It was owned by the city. The Danes Hall approached us with a concept to utilize that roadway to provide both an outdoor plaza space and an ADA accessible ramp to Rasmussen Park, which is adjacent to their property. and we agreed to transfer the land to the Danesall at no cost. Our public works crew provided in-kind work to convert the site into the plaza. And then in partnership with the Danesall, we applied and were successful in receiving $40,000 for that project, with the developer providing an additional $80,000. The site has been really, really cool in capping off all sorts of events for us in Waupaca, including Frühlings Fest in the spring, 4th of July parade, Halloween on Main. It also hosts our Christmas tree lighting ceremony. And every winter, like hundreds of people come out to Christmas carol out in the cold, which is pretty wild to me. So there's so much vibrancy at that site. And then next slide here, I think the last slide for me, Aaron, is just that the data from, so it's not just all anecdotal, it's not just all these images. The data shows that these placemaking strategies has achieved real results for us in Waupaca. Prior to these improvements, like I said earlier, significant disparities in visitation existed between North and South Main Street. In 2019, South Main Street saw about 3.19 visitors for every 1 visitor to North Main Street. Today, that has shrunk to 1.8 visitors to South Main for every 1 to North Main. So placemaking has provided a reason to visit North Main Street, and these anchor establishments are driving that change. Data from Placer AI shows that visitation at the Weddington Block property, which is where that record store is up 165% year over year and 820% from 3 years ago. After opening the Danesall Plaza in 2024, visitation has increased 27% to that property and is up 67% from 3 years ago. And while we don't have data yet from Empty Barrel, since it's just opened, I'm optimistic we're going to see similar results for that property. This balancing act across Main Street has had a positive impact on the district as a whole. Visits to the downtown are up 4.4% year over year and have increased by 25.1% over the last 3 years. So placemaking, I think, is the reason why we're seeing all of these balanced, steady, and sustainable investments in Waupaca now and into the future. So thank you. And the WDC has been absolutely essential to that change.
Awesome. You just got a great kudos from somebody who just visited Waupaca after a long time and was blown away. So for first person testimony, you can capture.
That is what we love to see.
Thanks, Julie, for those comments. It is always great to hear when somebody hasn't been there for a while, because I think they see the greater transformation than when you're probably there day to day and going through the process. So that's kind of exciting. There is a question. I would encourage anybody who has comments or questions for the speakers to put them in the chat. But one of them is first asking you to talk a little bit more about restaurant recruitment and efforts, sort of strategies that you have, maybe lessons learned specifically on attracting restaurants.
So I think I brought up restaurants as a gap in our business mix, and I would say, like Greg, we've seen a lot of really positive momentum, but we continue to struggle in restaurants. I think right now what we've actually, with the help of Aaron, we've gathered some information on different restaurant recruitment practices, I believe from Minnesota. And collectively as a team are really talking about what type of incentive package can we put together. We're finding that restaurants are risky propositions, getting bank financing challenging. And if we want to develop that segment, we're probably going to it's probably going to require some deeper incentives. And so I think the other challenge is like, are you ready when you find the right restaurateur in this case? And so we have a couple of vacant restaurants, and really trying to work with the property owners is where we are at. Because even if we put together an incentive package today, having a ready space, I think, is also key. So our work right now is focused on trying to get cooperative efforts together with the property owners to see if we can figure out how to fill those spaces. In the meantime, the food truck component of our project was really about trying to drive foot traffic. That's been beneficial. So as we talk to our retailers, for example, they are seeing the impact of that. And so, you know, as we gather more data points, and I can see from listening to Greg that we have work to do on the data front. And as we do that, you know, we're building our story and trying to make it compelling for someone to be here.
Yeah, Kathy's 100% right. You need the space because the cost of a restaurant, I mean, it's 50,000 minimum to put in a Houghton event. So if you don't have a spot with a Houghton event or a spot that has a landlord that wants a tenant with a Houghton event, it's going to be really, really challenging. And yeah, banks don't want to lend. Red Wing, Minnesota is the case study that Kathy was referring to. They are like the poster children for solid restaurant recruitment. So if you Google the restaurant Red Ring Restaurant Challenge, you can find it. They have lots of their stuff up that they probably, I don't think anybody could replicate quite as well.
So one of, just building on that, like we've seen though existing businesses. So for example, our bowling alley, that was just doing frozen pizzas. They added a kitchen, a full-fledged kitchen. And so it's, you know, bar food, but still like we're seeing current businesses make investments. We have a new restaurant going in that he's going into a space that just offered breakfast and lunch, and the community was screaming for evening service. And so he's expanding his hours of operation. So we're trying to think about how to help him. So you work with what you have, but I think you try to get ready for the next opportunity.
So Kathy, there's a question about the building that was filled, sort of the recruitment process. And I think a question for both of you, were there other vacant buildings or spaces that filled because of the new foot traffic and new sort of attention?
So I call that project on, I'm sorry, Greg, I don't mean to butt in, but like it was a catalyst project. And it's kind of a springboard from, we had a guy that owned a gym here and fitness center, and he was really passionate about the downtown. And so he started to identify what I already knew when I got here was we just had this very odd business mix. We didn't have a lot of destination type businesses where you know, people might come and then linger and or, you know, spill over into other complementary type businesses. And so adding these types of catalyst projects has been a springboard for future things. So while we didn't have vacancies, we had a really weird business mix that was not healthy for promoting economic development. And that has started to change. So from that one project, we've got a new brewery, we've got a wine bar, we've many retailers have come on board, and when I get out, people are saying, wow, that's a destination. Waupun's a destination. You should go and check out the fabulous things that are there. And so it definitely does have that catalytic type effect, I think.
But did you have former murderers? I mean, that.
Yeah, we do. We will continue.
I think our former exotic pet store owner, I wonder if he's in Waupun. I don't know. Yeah. I think that for us, there were, I think the Danes Hall, like saving the Danes Hall was saved prior to my time in Waupaca. I think that was the catalytic project. It's such a, I don't know if for those who know Waupaca, it's a really gorgeous historic building. It's on the National Registry. It was an old antique mall that then became vacant. There were serious discussions about it having to come down.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody who has historic family connection to Waupaca, who has Danish heritage, and that's really important to him, he came in and saved it and turned it into an event and wedding space. And I think that person's connection and pride in, you know, saving this cultural like legacy in Waupaca has ended up driving all of those additional projects on our North Main Street, like the distillery project, that Whitington Hall property, obviously the Danes Hall Plaza. So I think, you know, there is an element here of, I think we got lucky to have such a great champion, but also trying to disengage the people who have historic ties to your community. I think that very seldom are the people who come into a packet to invest, very rarely are they like true outsiders. Almost everybody has some sort of connection to this place who chooses to come back here and invest.
So local, I think the local investment and understanding who your local leaders probably are within that, willing to take the opportunity, which leads me to another question that's posted. Do either of you have any really unique community engagement strategies to share? Some that were a little bit more successful or maybe unique than others? How did you get people to show up? Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah. So, my family owns a business here, so I have a bit of a stake in this game. But I'm a big believer. I came from a post-secondary kind of institution prior to this in terms of my role. And I'm a big believer in creating opportunity and equipping people with the right knowledge, skills, and abilities wherever possible. And so we have focused for 10 years on ecosystem building and really thinking about the entrepreneurial spaces that exist here. So bringing in new tools. And it's been a real culture shift for us, I would say. So getting people to think about your opportunity is more than just Waupun. And how do you live in this space where sales are virtual and you can reach the globe if you want to. And that fundamentally was, I think, one of the kind of pivot points for us where people actually, after we did a training, we were looking at business model canvas training and really trying to focus on how do you bring more resources to a business and help them expand. I had people actually say to me like, well, this is just Waupun. Why do you think this is going to work here? And my response was, because you think it's just Waupun. And we have to build an ecosystem that's going to help us thrive, or, we're not going to be growing, and that's going to be problematic for everybody. So people owned buildings and there was an investment happening, and then you started to see that shift created opportunity for investment, and one led to the next, I would say.
Parking, to be honest, when I looked at the bird's eye views, seemed to be plentiful. But was there any concern about parking or location of parking?
It's funny to me like everything that I'm seeing is just like, oh yeah, for sure. This is always happening. Even Kathy talking about your food truck comment about restaurants, it's like 100% we have all of that. And I think we could pave over the entire city of Waupun and put parking in, and people would be like, parking, there's not enough parking.
Yes, 100. I've never been in a community that didn't come up. Never.
It needs to be right in front of the front door.
Yeah. So I think that they do fixate on it, to be honest. I think that engaging other constituencies helps make that voice just one voice of many others. And I think that, when you bring in, because I think that maybe we have a tendency, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think we have a tendency maybe as economic developers to focus on like reaching out to our businesses as our first and maybe only source. But when you bring in like the arts and cultural organizations, well, they have a different perspective. You bring in the Friends of the Parks groups and the biking groups. You start thinking about these improvements as a quality of life issue, not primarily like an economic development issue for that specific business. And you also can do good planning to demonstrate that, like, no, we've run the numbers and there is ample parking. Well, obviously you don't want to be dismissive, but I think that you can build a pretty strong case by amplifying some voices for maybe some constituencies that are otherwise a little harder to reach.
And
That's
I would
fair.
say, or who?
Go ahead, Erin, if you have more to say.
Well, I was just going to say we do surveys in many of our communities of consumers of downtown, and one of the things, if you go somewhere else, where do you go? And if you don't come downtown, what is the number 1, 2 reason why? And the only people on those surveys that consistently whoever said that parking is a reason that they don't actually come downtown are over 65. In which case it's not the parking, it's the walking. So if we can do things like have more handicap spaces or have more benches, it's not that people are concerned about parking, it's they're concerned about walking too far. So I think that is something you can also address, that you're going to provide, valet park, whatever you can do to make it more accessible for those people.
In our work with the UW extension with the charrette process, that parking came up again. We're actually doing in our back alleyway project where that's part of the focus, is looking at how do you enhance not only flow and safety, but parking. So we actually bought a building that was just in a really weird spot in a middle of a parking lot. And we took that down, and that's going to be paved over. And so, I always remind the business community that parking lots are super expensive and they don't generate revenue. So be careful what you ask for, because we're bound by a district boundary here, and there's only so much we're going to be able to do. But if it's a great destination, people will park and walk, and that's not a bad thing. So
right, give them a good experience. We've also had success where we would map how often spaces were used, different times of the week, weekend, and then it usually shows that only during major events is every space probably filled. So it helps sort of broaden that perspective. So did either of you use historic preservation tax credits for any of the projects? And can you sort of talk a little bit about that?
I don't know, Greg,
they were used for the Danes Hall. That was before I was involved. And so I really can't speak directly to the process of applying for those, unfortunately. But I do know that they were a part of that part of that project.
The only thing I can offer on that front is our historic district is on the registry. It is a tool that we mentioned to developers. Everyone seems to be very afraid of using the tool because they have heard horror stories about, like it being adding additional cost and time and all of that. And so I have not personally had great success in getting that tool introduced to the community, but it's one we try to continue to work on.
Okay. So before I jump to sort of a last question for both of you, Natalie, our department assistant, will drop a survey link into the chat. Please tell us what you thought of today's speakers. Obviously, they've been all great, but also we're looking for ideas for speakers for next spring. We have a couple more spots to fill for our spring series, and any other thoughts that you have for us as we continue to plan. I also just want to ask if either of you want to share any tips for those online that are thinking of applying and submitting for the grant. Do you have lessons learned, strategies that have worked really well, or maybe some hiccups to share with them? And I think we're really excited to see the next set of projects coming forward.
I think from Wapan's perspective, the best work we did, and again, it's underappreciated, I think, but the planning work that we did laid a foundation, and I can cite example after example of where this is true, where you invest in the planning, you think it's not going anywhere, but eventually when the right funding opportunity comes along, it makes it a lot easier to lay out your grant application and support it with your funding request. And I think that don't let your community get away with not planning, because otherwise it becomes very ad hoc.
Yeah, 1000%. I mean, I don't know if I can disagree with that and be like, and that is my only comment, but like as a grant writer, if it's not in a plan, it doesn't exist. I mean, and there are so many, especially in the last few years, there have been so many different funding opportunities that have just kind of appeared out of the ether, and then disappeared just as quickly. And we have been blessed to have a plethora of really high quality plans that probably have been sitting on shelves. But when the right funding opportunity comes along or the right funder knocks on the door, if we can dust off those plans and say, like, look, like this exists as a concept, it's kind of embedded. There are, in the best case scenario, some like renderings that exist, then that project is ready to move. Without that, you're really scrambling. And I don't think that you're really positioning your community to be responsive to opportunities. So, and a lot of grant opportunities, I don't know about the WDC, but a lot of grant opportunities through the DNR in particular require you to have plans and submit those plans with your application. And so you don't want to be caught without one.
You at least have to, you at least have to have document that it's come up before, that you're not just like making up a project to get grant funds.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I also dropped in the chat a list of some of the other projects that we funded if you want to look for more inspiration. And per Julie's comment, a list, we did a profile of some small historic tax credit projects to try to make them seem more approachable and highlight small scale developers that have used them. And so I dropped that link in there too.
Well, thank you to all three of you. This has been, I think, a great resource, but also really inspiring. It's really great to see the impact, and it's over time. You know, it takes a few years for these to come to fruition, but it's always really great to see the ripple effect that's helping smaller cities as well as larger cities across the state. And really kudos to you, Erin, because so much of the state is covered by this grant process. So it's really great to see the equity spread around the entire state, and the excitement. So reminder to everyone, November 12th is our next Innovative Cities lecture. It's marketplaces, so everything from food halls to farmers markets, connecting food access to health, and planning strategies for your community to embrace those. So we'll have both a national and a local perspective at that one. So thanks again for joining us today and for sharing your expertise. We'll see you at the next ICL. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.